Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. In this video, folks, we're going to dive into talking about something not only because we do dive in talking about organizations and organizational culture, and then that touches on every aspect of our lives, right? Everything's connected. But today, we're going to really open up the throttle a little bit here, folks. We're going to talk a little bit about how everything in our lives has been trying to wake us up the entire time. I've listened to plenty of videos myself, and I've seen this, listened to that, podcast, all the things, right? And you often hear, awakening. Are people awakened, right? Or are they awake, and all these sorts of things, right? And a lot of times, this is more or less a spiritual or faith driven awakening. Sometimes consciousness kind of sterilized down to its scientific core element is our energy, right? We're matter and energy. We do know this, right? And so oftentimes awakening gets kind of swirled around within that. It's like, are you awakened? Are you conscious, right? Are you awake to what's going on around you? Right? That could be a very practical way to perceive it as well, right? But let's step back and pan back just for a second. And if you think about it, think of all the actors and players in your life, right? Let's look at life as a play, right? Take a bit of a Shakespearean approach, I guess you could say, in some ways, and see everybody in your life, and as well as yourself, as actors in this grand play, right? But if you think about it, as far as an awakening or being aware, right? Let's couch awakening as being aware, right, of what's going on around us. Now, there's a lot of things that get revealed throughout our entire lives, and naturally of late there's been a lot of things being revealed, globally, geopolitical, all the things, right? So there's a lot of revealing going on, and and that wakes us up to what's, things that are actually going on in the world, right? We may have been thinking, oh, this is a particular way, and then all of a sudden some major information comes in to, I won't say upset the assumption of our normal lives, but it may, throw a ripple in there and make us go, whoa, I didn't really account for this, right? You've got people trying to chase down UFO stuff. You got people trying to chase down this thing and that thing and everything, right? And leaked information about this and technology and all the things. And there's, it's true that there's a lot more information about everything coming out, right? And elevating itself to our sight line, so that what? It is awakening us, right? We are essentially going through an awakening, right? Especially as an entire collective humanity, right? But as I said earlier, if you pan back and look at your life, even the micro, I say micro, looking at the whole us, all of humanity, but then when you look at the micro of a person or a few people, look at what goes on in our lives. We have daily struggles and challenges that we have to, we're trying to overcome, we're trying to survive, we're trying to do all these things. But we also have things, obstacles that we placed in our way, right? Believe it or not, every problem that you have, and none of us want to hear this, right? And this is part of that awakening, right? Every single challenge or item or issue or person who is upset in the apple cart in the moment, whether it be like in that, few hours or that day or that week or month, whatever, all of that you've invited into your life. Now, why did you invite some of things into your life? Some things may just be obstacles, right? They're not good, they're not bad, they're just in the way. It's like, I have to circumnavigate this situation, right? These are the cards I was dealt, right? We hear that. But who dealt those cards? We, oftentimes, if we go back far enough, we dealt those our own cards, right? But then it grows. There might be people in your life. There might be relationships, past, present, and who knows, into the future, right? That, well, as we see the future, it might be people you select into your life, right? That pose, what might seem to be people who are aligned. And this ties directly to our organizations and our relationships and our, everything we're involved with in community, all these things. We might go, hey, these people align and we can get some things done. We're productive, life is thriving. And then go down the lane and go down the road a little while in these connected relationships, say community wide. And then you find out X, Y, and Z, and then those things kind of implode, right? Sometimes we don't really vet the scenario, but I suspect that it wouldn't matter. You could vet anybody or anything because no one is perfect, right? So, and nobody's going to be perfectly aligned with you. That being said, we select some of these people and situations, right? You may go work for an employer, right? Who's also, they're there, you can work for them, you can help them, obviously they're going to pay you to work there, there's a reciprocative, there is a value exchange that makes sense on paper, but you don't align with the mission of the organization. You don't really align with the core group or the leadership, approach or how they treat others, right? And maybe it's a temporary thing in your own mind. You may have already said, hey, this is a temporary, I'm not sticking around here for long. I'll do a year or two, whatever it is, and then I'm gone. But needless to say, we will select situations because even if you are consciously doing that, you're buying into other landmines associated with, okay, that organization in this example, or a relationship, or community, or whatever. And this is, frankly, folks, if you're wondering why a lot of people aren't participating as much, it's because they become awakened because of experiences they've gone through. And they've had to, and it takes time for them to reconcile out of their system, if you will, that they could be what? Betrayed or manipulated, right? But what? We picked these situations because deep down, we knew that was going to be the case. Because deep down, and this is the kicker, folks, we needed to experience something harsh enough that would kind of pie in the face us enough to question our realities, right? Our assumptions, right? Question our assumptions about relationships, about community, about, all the things, geopolitical things, the world, different countries, all of it, right? We pick these things to pie in the face us, okay? And then just think of somebody slapping a pie in your face, okay? And to wake us up. We've picked these things individually, collectively, as smaller groups, and so on and outward, all of these things to wake ourselves up. To wake ourselves up to the fact that we're not awakened, right? These are things that are progressively getting more difficult. And how do we know this? Steve, how do you know this? How do I know this? Because you can take a person of meager needs, right? You can take somebody who sadly is trying to live off the street. Well, their challenges are right there, right? They're literally dealing with it every moment, right? And I don't even need to itemize where they're going to sleep, shelter, food, all the things, right? God forbid if they get sick. I mean, think about it. Everything. I mean, and that's somebody of meager state, right? And then you take somebody who is wealthy, even mildly wealthy. I want to say rich. That's kind of a vague term. But we'll just say substantially well off. We'll say, 2, 3, 4 times better than average people. Okay. So, or more. What happens? They achieve a certain, say progression. Maybe it's achievements in life and income and growth and all these things. And then what happens is they kind of hit a little bit of a boredom plateau. So what do? They will go out and sadly, there's a split here. There are people who will go out and find other challenges or say challenges, could be obstacles, could be challenges, whatever, that are driven with a desire for good outcomes. Like some of them might be really great at, altruistic things, helping people, right? They might veer that way. But in the process, maybe they have to deal with regulations and they have to deal with the government and all these things. So they get in a tangle with that with the motive of trying to create a good outcome, right? So there's one one direction off that fork. The other one is the nefarious. They get bored, a little bored, and they start doing all kinds of crazy stuff, right? And manipulative things. These are the ones who, are sadly at the, highest levels, I guess you could say, manipulating markets and doing all these things, okay? They're the ones that are, well above the power structure of any one country that are doing this thing. Why is this? Because they're bored, essentially. And and they have basically put obstacles in their way now to what? Kill that boredom. And how do they kill their own boredom? They go out there and manipulate. Let's see if we can do this. It's a game. It's like a game of Risk to them, or it could be Monopoly for people who are this way at the, say, local level, right? And then the board just gets smaller. It's like checkers for us average folks in the world. Maybe chess graduates to chess because we're trying to keep ourselves in a safe position in life, right? We're trying to avoid all the worst things from occurring, and so on, right? The board just gets more complicated. But the common theme here, folks, is that all of us, from that individual who's living meagerly all the way up to the person who's very well off, or we'll say the powers that be, globally, they're putting obstacles in their way. And in some respects, we are imagining these things, right? The same way somebody of meager means probably could walk into a church or whatever and start to peel away at some of the things that are the most difficult for them, right? They don't, right? All the way up in everybody's average life, all the way in between all the wealthy people, different plateaus of their life, right? Everybody's picking a thing to throw in their way. It could be somebody who is very good at their career, but they didn't really they weren't that attentive to their children, and their children are struggling. So now their children become the obstacle. Not that the children are, evil or anything, but, the children maybe weren't invested in time, right? Time, love, attention, all the things, right? So like a garden, they didn't grow that garden, but they grew their business, right? And they're wealthy. And vice versa. Some people grew their family, fantastic, but they didn't grow their business, or they didn't, on their career side. So for each of us, it's different, folks. We have negated or left areas, if you think of 360 degrees and you're in the middle of it, right? There's so many things to maintain balance, right? And none of us are perfect. So even if you were doing really well with that, there's always going to be something. But keep in mind, we picked those somethings, right? Didn't have to have kids, didn't have to be a business owner, didn't have to not be a business owner, just be, somebody who works for a company. Didn't have to be a this, didn't have to do that, didn't have to do any of it, chose to do it. Chose to do it and take on more. I'll give you the most obvious example that I can, and this is like, as soon as I tell you this and explain it, you're going to go, oh yeah, okay. I love animals. I love cats and dogs. Some people are, oh, I can't stand cats. I don't like dogs or whatever, or love either of the two. I love all animals. So not an issue for me. But there are people who don't have their financial part of their life figured out, but they'll take on a dog and a cat, right? Maybe they've got kids and they're just making it, and they'll take on animals, right? And they'll do these things. Now, on the face of it, you go, well, yeah, that's just kind of a norm. People do that. Yeah, it's true. But if the primary things in your life aren't synced up, right? Why would you bring on that? And here's the kicker, folks. This is at all levels of society. It doesn't matter if you're essentially poor or uber wealthy people do this. And why is that? They'd much rather pick one more thing to add to their level of responsibility that distracts them from being pretty, better than okay in any other area, right? So somebody who's struggling financially has got, 3 dogs and a cat. Well, if you didn't have 3 dogs and a cat, you're making it. Or, let's pick substances, right? People who are codependent on substances. Some people smoke, other people drink, right? Excessively, not just socially. And what are the kids deficient in? Back in the day, do the kids have shoes on their feet? Do they have clothes? Do they have this? Do they have food, right? Was it more important for the parents to buy cigarettes and alcohol versus keep them in the fridge filled, right? As best possible. And these sorts of things. Was it better to be purchasing these things versus buying a jacket, right? Is it better for me, people who have hobbies, right? It's like, oh, I have this hobby and I spend all this money, but then you're neglecting, maybe you're neglecting needs of your family, right? All those things. We do this, folks. Nobody is forcing us to do this. Now, what am I saying? Am I saying, oh, well, we're all bad and evil? Well, to go there is missing the point. The point is, you aren't going to be able to spend time to figure out who you are until you stop investing yourself in so many other superfluous areas that it allows you to take the time. There are people who could retire and enjoy life, but instead they take, even a modest level. But because they get involved in things that are well beyond their scope, they're emotionally pulled in, or they're overgivers, so they're, being taken advantage of in that same way. Been down that road, have the t-shirt, the tracksuit, and the whole thing. Been down there, have done that, have been an overgiver. And what? I chose that. Why is that? Because that became my pie in the face, right? And once you get that pie in the face and you go, oh my gosh, people were just taking advantage, right? Then you step back and you go, okay. And you start to do a deep dive. You start to clear that clutter away, right? Some of these situations away. Now, you're not going to clear all the decks, right? And I wouldn't advocate for that. I wouldn't go run out and get rid of your animals or anything. Just be aware of it is part of an awakening, right? If you've got a family, hey, delegate some of the duties off, right? Don't overburden yourself. Keep try to find more balance. At work is the same way. If you're an organization that's heaping more onto some team members than others, if you're not fairly spreading the workload around and it's having a detriment, and so you have high turnover and all those things, the response to what you're doing is creating turnover, which is slowing the growth of your organization, your ability to hire and keep good team members, because you're chasing new employees because you're not doing the stuff right to begin with, as better, right? Not perfect, but better. So you're spending more time turning people over and training them up than you are improving your product or building up the team you already have, right? And you're distracted. And that same distraction, it's the same with the pets, right? We're just using a smaller example, right? A lesser example as far as the scope and size. But this is what we do, folks. We will create tasks to distract us from growth. And the only way you're going to grow, because part of the primary element of growth is what? Awakening is growth, right? And you can't grow if you can't slow it down, find a quiet space and reflect, right? And reflect on your life and go, wow, where am I, spending all my time and energy? We have to also be careful too because of our devices and all that, right? Online, being fully conscious, right? Fully conscious of the fact that you just gave an hour to this device and you ignored your spouse or your, partner and all the things, right? So you got to look at some of these things and you got to weigh it out and go, hey, and when I or you or anybody does a thing, should we be surprised that other things fall through the cracks? No, we shouldn't be surprised, right? but are we awake enough to see these things? Because if you're awake enough to see it, then you'll start to awaken even more, and you'll start to see, in some instances, where people are taking advantage of you, in some instances where you're giving people time that they didn't ask for. Because remember, you might be an overgiver, but nobody's really asking you to give, right? I've been there too. You're trying to do the good and right thing. You're trying to do the helpful thing. You're trying to be, serve people in your community, and that's fine. But you got to keep a balance, right? You wouldn't go out and serve your community and then neglect your family, right? Or neglect, your professional life because you have to, take care of that to take care of the other, right? So, it's a balance, but you can't find balance if you're not awakening. If you're not going through a level of awakening and understanding that simple things, simple tasks, simple things, even if you're by yourself, you let your laundry pile up. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. You neglected some aspect of your life, which is now going to force you to have to deal with it like a giant, mountain of responsibility or cleanup effort, right? And that cleanup effort can be emotional. It can be, faith or spirit, spiritually. It can be all aspects, your physical health, your emotional health, all the things, right? Are you getting enough exercise? Are you attending to what diet you're consuming and avoiding things that aren't good for you, right? And trying to find balance there. Why is that? Because all of that is going to help with all of the rest of it, right? So everything is connected, folks. Everything is connected. So I come back to, I guess you could say, the title of this. You've been living your life as an individual, as teams, as organizations, as, the entire planet. You've been living your entire life trying to wake yourself up by doing these things. That is the core bottom line. You forget other people trying to wake you up. People can barely, they're just trying to, they're distracted with their own distractions. But you've been trying to wake yourself up for your entire life, even if you haven't been here long. And it starts with recognizing these things. What things am I putting in the way? And some of these can be false beliefs. They could be false beliefs or distractions or conditioning, how you were raised. Did you question your conditioning, right? Did you question anything in your life? If you don't question, you're not going to get to the core of who you are, what makes you tick. Because I don't really use happiness as a barometer, but I will say, contentedness, right? Harmony, right? Is there harmony in your life? Which I just equate to a real state of balance, right? You're not going to achieve harmony if you keep throwing things in your way or allowing people to throw things in your path that upset your journey. And the sooner you realize that this is occurring, the sooner you can, gently, kindly, respectfully veer your path away from the obstacles that are in it, right? Some of this can be communication too. I'm not saying you just throw your friends away and throw, things out of your life. Sometimes it's communicating, right? So start there. Anyway, folks, I hope you understand this. Ultimately, whether we all awaken or not, we are all definitely distracted by many things. And I really think that the biggest part of our inability to connect at the local level, as states, as nations, in the entire globe, is because we're so fixated on the things that are avoiding the manipulative, narcissistic aspects of culture, and giving that all of our attention, and then allowing those aspects to thwart our lives and throw obstacles in our way. So what do you need to do? You need to basically say no. Somebody's throwing a bunch of boulders on your road. Well, hey, let's all get together and get those boulders off the road, right? There's no reason we can't have thoroughfare. There can't be an even flow of commerce and traffic down this particular road, and then just make it happen, right? So there's that. All right, folks, hope you have a fantastic day. Remember, hit that good green domino to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. When you do this, not only are you helping to transform culture, but you're transforming your own life. But remember, we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to transform on the inside. So important. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.